I feel so deeply for parents of teens today because they've got a very hard task, which is to give your kids a level of independence that you want a normal adolescent to have and that they have in conjunction with their peers, while also protecting them from things they shouldn't have access to. And I hear this a lot from parents, which is like, I don't want my kid to be on social media, but all their friends are on social media. So like, if I don't let them on it, they're left out. Man, that's a hard problem, because if you don't let them be where their friends are and they don't have friends, they're probably going to have mental health issues. But if you let them on social media and they spend too much time on social media, they're probably gonna have mental health issues.
Patrick, welcome to Founders and Empanadas, my friend. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Joshua, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
And I understand that you recently started a podcast yourself. I'd love to hear a little bit more about what it's called and what are some of the themes you cover.
Yeah, thanks for asking. We're working on a show called Self-Disclosed. The idea is really to push forward the need for better youth mental health services, which we're obviously focused on building. And our mission is to end the youth mental health crisis, which is a bit of a big task. And so we recognize the need to bring lots of voices across health insurance, providers, just the whole sort of healthcare spectrum together to have conversations about what's working, what's not. So we're hoping to push forward some more ways that we can help kids with their mental health.
I love it. And Patrick, I wish that I had some things as a teenager. Between the ages of 18 and 19 and a half, I was essentially bedridden with pretty severe depression for a year and a half there. So I really, really admire what you're building, and thank you so much for the mission that you're building towards.
Yeah, thanks for sharing.
Yeah. And Patrick, I'd love to hear a little bit more about the origin story and how you got your first customer.
What Somethings is it's a virtual behavioral health platform focused on, for teenagers specifically, focused on connecting them with what are called certified peer specialists, who are young adults between the ages of 20 and 30 who have overcome their own lived experience with mental health and who are trained and certified to be able to provide support in a paraprofessional context. And what we learned from kids was that they were much more interested in talking to somebody who was young and relatable, who had gone through what they've actually gone through, rather than the mom and pop clinician or therapist in their community. And there's lots of need for those as well, but we got really interested in how could we build a platform to connect teens with somebody like a relatable mentor. We saw the outcomes that it could drive, and so that's what we've been building. Rewind back, when I was a teenager, I struggled with an eating disorder, and I really struggled to find mental health providers who I felt like were effective for me and who were able to help me. And I wasn't able to get treatment until well into my undergrad at Stanford. So there was probably like a 6-year period where I was struggling with an eating disorder. And when I was able to later in my college years find treatment that helped, it really just changed my life in the best possible way. And so I always joke that I became everyone's annoyingly pro therapy friend, just like as a person in their life. And I started talking about my experience, and I think I was positively surprised at how open other people were with me when I was able to share what I was going through. And so I just became really passionate about mental health. I was working on a master's in artificial intelligence at Stanford, and I had a classmate die by suicide. And that was a very reflective moment for me about sort of the problems that I wanted to be solving. I sort of had all the smartest people in the world around me studying artificial intelligence, crypto, biosciences, like all this super cool stuff. But it felt like there was a really huge problem in youth mental health that nobody was solving, that sort of like was a large societal problem that if we didn't solve, we were going to be facing ramifications for like a long time. So I just sort of felt a calling to try to solve that problem, and have been on the journey ever since. I guess you asked how I got my first customer. I can sort of jump into that, and sorry for ranting here, but we after our initial research phase where we learned that teens were looking for somebody who was young and relatable, like a peer mentor to get support from. And I think we also identified that the workforce shortage challenges across mental health have been so profound that there was a real opportunity to match these two things together: the teen desire with the market and landscape need. Um, but obviously, like you got to start somewhere, and so I had received training as an RA and crisis training when I was at Stanford. Um, my senior year, I was an RA for a dorm, and so they put you through about a week long of training. It includes a crisis training, and so I was like, I wonder if I could get any parent to pay me as a mentor figure for their kid to help them navigate whatever they're going through. So I created a little Facebook ad. I put my face on it and I put my credentials. It was like Stanford RA, crisis trained, has overcome mental health, and I put like $200 behind the ad just like to see what happened with like a terrible website and then like a link to like a book a call with me. And I got like 2 calls from that Facebook ad, and one of the parents ended up, signing their kid up and paying me to mentor their kid. So I was like, "Wow, if off of this, a parent was willing to do that with me, like, there's definitely something here." So, and so we've been working on it for 3 years ever since then.
That's pretty ultimate validation of, product market fit if a little, little image of yourself is enough that it takes. That's awesome. Yeah, I really wish that I had this because I went through a year and a half of, connecting with therapists and, there's no similarities that I had with them. They were like in their mid-50s. Me as an 18-year-old is like, what do you know about the experience of growing up in my generation? So that's very unique, and kudos to you for finding that unique value prop there. Um, I'd love to hear a little bit more about just what you find broken about the current pipeline for teen mental health support, and how somewhere is specifically fixing that.
Teenagers and people under 18 years of age, I think are very different from adults, and all of healthcare was really built for most of mental health care was really built for adults. And things that are teen focused usually just are adult products that are slapped with the label teen. The biggest example of this is if you try to get a 14-year-old to show up to a weekly therapy session, it's really hard, especially on their own volition. It's hard on the parents. It's hard on the kids. They don't like it. I was talking to a parent today who shared this like thing where they said half of the times where we bring our teen to therapy, they're having a good day. And so they just sit in therapy and they don't know what to talk about. And then the next day, when they don't have a therapy session, things hit the fan. And so the model is just like it's not really right for kids under 18, especially kids who have phones and they live on the internet. Um, the other thing that I think is worth calling out is the way that teenagers seek care is really different from adults. Um, Teens start when they have a problem, and many of them are able to identify that they have a problem. They will go to Reddit, they will go to Google, they will go to YouTube, and they will try to find content and educational resources to resonate with what their experience is because they want to make sure they want to understand what's going on. They want to understand that they're not the only ones who've gone through it, and then they want to also understand what do they do. Um, After they look for content and resources, then if they find anything that resonates, they might jump over to an online community. This would be like a Reddit or a Discord. They might try a self-serve app like a meditation app or a habit tracking app. And only then are they willing to sort of like try something like a paraprofessional or a community or a group. And then only after they've tried all those things, if they have not worked, will they try to go to a clinical resource like a therapist or a psychiatrist. And even then, to get them there, you also have to have at some point them be referred by a trusted resource. So there's just like a ton of steps that are required to ramp kids up to getting into a therapist or psychiatrist on their own accord. What happens when it's not their own accord? Um, the common example is a teen who is struggling. They are unwilling to talk to their parents about it, or they're just hiding it. Um, they search online, they don't find a resource that works for them, they don't find content that resonates, so they just kind of struggle in silence. They escalate, something happens, they have a self-harm attempt or a suicide attempt, and the parents sort of like now finally realize a problem. There's a freak out, and they either take them to the ER or they force them to go to a psychiatrist or a therapist. At that point, though, you have a teen who's gone through some really hard stuff, and then they don't. They're being forced into treatment in a way that doesn't feel good for them. So whether you engage, whether they adhere to the treatment, is very hit or miss. So our whole philosophy, and I think the thing that we've learned is like if you want to get kids ramped to the right level of care early on, you have to sort of meet them in this way that they seek care, which is content, it's self-serve stuff, it's apps, it's paraprofessionals, and then only is it clinicians. And so that's sort of how we've built our product. We leverage the peer specialist mentor as the easy on ramp paraprofessional. We go out into social media with content, with communities to actually get kids ramped on to our paraprofessionals, peers. And then only then do we try to refer them to clinicians if they need, once we've gotten their trust by building them in. So a long-winded way of sort of answering what is wrong with the landscape for teens. And I guess what's wrong is like there's really nothing that does that. All the services today are just trying to jump kids into care when they're not really meeting this like way that kids seek care.
That very much resonates with my story of, I was kind of a silent struggler. I would, this was the early days of YouTube back then, but I would, check resources on YouTube and wouldn't share with any friends or family members, and felt a stigma of kind of feeling this depression and had no one to talk to about it. And I'm curious, how does somewhere reach, those kids that are also in that silent struggling phase of not wanting to share, maybe from a place of shame or uncertainty?
So we go out into the communities on with content. We're very active on Instagram and TikTok and Snapchat. We're not just posting content though; like we are engaging with the things that kids engage with, like the meme accounts. Like we are active in their community online. Um, I'd say that's probably the main way. To be honest with you, a lot of kids find us. We've invested a lot in our online presence, around our website, around our SEO, around our social. So a lot of kids are reaching out and finding us because are we have become part of that chain of escalation up now, where a kid is looking for help, they find one of our pieces of content or resources, and then they're just kind of escalating up. So that's the main way.
Very cool. And how about the other side of the marketplace? How do you find these mentors that are able to connect with teens and have those relevant stories that they went through themselves?
It's been easier than we expected, to be honest. And I think what we learned pretty early on was there's a lot of young adults in and around college psychology programs who really resonate with the idea of doing this and using their lived experience to help others, but who maybe aren't planning on going and becoming a full-on clinician because it takes years. So offering a paid opportunity to get trained and use your lived experience, which is really meaningful and a very um, strong economic opportunity for someone who's a grad student or late in college, we found to be a very resonant value prop. So we have thousands of people who've applied to be mentors coming from colleges all around the country. Um, and yeah, there's just, I think, there amidst a workforce shortage of clinicians, it's like a very um, heartwarming thing that we've seen how many people want to help jump in and help out.
I love that. And how do you train and support these mentors that maybe haven't worked with teens before, and just help them to show up with teen instead of trying to fix the teen they're working with?
It's hard and it's a long process. We all of our mentors are certified peer specialists, so all that training is handled by the state. But when mentors come to us after getting their certification, there's a lot of training that they have to do, especially with the way that we deliver our product. Our product is very much text focused. It's very much mentors have to be proactive. With a video calling paradigm, someone just has to show up on a video call and listen and respond. In our world, our mentors are actively building the relationships with their teens. They're doing research online for what the teen is interested in. They're creating messages to reach out. They're reaching out proactively. Like it's a very active relationship. And so that does require a lot of training. And so, we spend a fair amount of time in the weeks leading up to a mentor starting with their teen. Again, this is after they've been certified by a state, and done sort of all the crisis management training, all of the sort of baseline mental health work. We spend a lot of time training them on how to engage teens, how to share their own story more effectively, when to share their own story more effectively, um, what to do when a variety of teens need a variety of different things. Right? We're sort of like we have to train them in how to be a good mentor as well as how to train them to be a peer supporter. Um, and we've got an amazing clinical team of supervisors who are licensed clinicians who are the ones who are doing a lot of this coaching too. But yeah, it's an involved process. And on the other side, what we see is that we have mentors come out who are really effective. They're very good at what they do, but it's almost like boot camp.
Yeah, I love it. And I'm curious, do the mentors also connect with each other and maybe share best practices? Do you have like a community of the on the mentor side?
We're working on making it better. To be honest, I'd be lying if I said it was great today. And it's feedback that we've received often from mentors. And so we are hopefully in the next few months launching a community for mentors and getting them to interact with each other in a more heavyweight way.
Very cool. That's a pretty compelling first job out of college. Being able to like immediately make pretty huge impacts in people's lives. Super cool.
It's been interesting. Yeah, I always joke like I've never had a real job. I've had like internships, but I've never had a real job. So I'm sure that my team would tell you that I'm deficient along a host of dimensions that somebody with an actual job would have. But I think I make up for it in my passion and stubbornness that I just keep showing up.
I'm the same way. I don't make the best employee, but I'm fine with like throwing around empanadas and doing the crazy founder journey. That right there with you. Awesome, Patrick. And I'd love it if you could share a story about maybe the most surprising thing a teen has shared that really made you rethink your entire approach to mental health.
I'll share one that's just off the top of my head. Maybe isn't a perfect answer to your question, but we had a teen tell us in a very emphatic way that she has a psychiatrist, a therapist, as well as her mentor. She said, if my psychiatrist and my therapist and my peer mentor all told me the same things, I would listen to my peer mentor because they're cool and they get it. And like, I'm almost frustrated by that because like it's the same thing. I'm sure the psychiatrist was the first person to say anything, right? The fact that it takes so much and takes the right delivery mechanism to get into the minds of these kids is like it's frustrating, but it is also reality. Um, and so I think like one of the things that it makes us remember is our mentors are not necessarily, we're not the ones diagnosing and treating kids with our mentors. We have clinicians who could do that, but they're kind of the messengers for the same message that the clinicians are saying. And so like, I think very early on, we made sure that our mentors like never said anything clinical, right? Like they never, they stayed very far away from it. And I think that was actually wrong. And I think that's actually wrong by all dimensions of the field of peer support. Like I think where peer supporters are most effective is when they are um, almost like parroting the things that the actual treating clinician has said to do or said to change. And when you have the right person with the message that the peer supporters are not necessarily capable of creating, but when you have the clinician on the back end who is saying, "Hey, this is how we're going to treat you," and then you've got the right person delivering that message, it can really change the trajectory of outcomes. So that's just sort of like a surprising thing that I think I underestimated.
Can you share an example of that? Of just how reframing the clinical phase was able to have it really resonate with the team?
There's lots of examples, everything from like the tools that we've heard kids get recommended for how to sort of ramp down from like a self-harm situation, all the way to like, um, how do we get kids to like go to school and not be like super, a lot of kids have difficulty going to school and they make like a big behavioral fit with their parents. And like, seen a lot of therapists who tell kids how to get through that, and then it doesn't work, and then the mentors say the exact same thing, and then the kids kind of like do it.
Yeah, makes sense. Patrick, something I'd be interested to dive in with you as well is just the difference in Gen Z versus any generation before. I've seen a lot of studies about the impact of growing up in COVID and how that's impacted mental health. But what are some other areas that you think, Gen Z is unique from prior generations from maybe a digital standpoint or any other factors?
I think maybe it's first worth talking about how they're the same. Like all of us have been through being an adolescent, and all of us understand the challenges of like the insecurity, the trying to fit into the social scene, the trying to have friends, the trying to date, the trying to do well in school, trying to figure out your life. Like none of that has changed, right? That is all the same. I think the challenge with being a kid today is you add on layers of complexity to it that make it much more challenging. One layer of complexity, I think, is this world of digital technology surrounded by social media. I think a great example of how this makes things more complex is before phones and before social media, you had sort of the clickiness happening at school, right? You had the who was in the in group, who was in the out group, who was friends with who hung out with who. But when you went home, that left. Like that does not end anymore. That is like 24/7. Who is liking whose post, who is engaging with who's getting invited to things. Um, like I hear this story so often where it's like a teen is like, my two best friends got invited to Jenna's party and I didn't get invited. And they didn't tell me about it because they wanted to go, but they knew I didn't get invited. So I felt bad. And now I feel terrible because I feel left out by my best friends, and like, and not only that, I can see them at the party. Like I can see their stories. I can see them posting about it. So it just sort of like it adds layers of complexity. Um, I think another thing is like kids are exposed to the internet, which is essentially exposing them to the world, right? Very early, very young. It's kind of like I'm in New York City right now. It's like kids who grow up in New York are like mature at 14 in a way that a 14-year-old from Austin, Texas, where I grew up, is not. Just because of like what they're exposed to. So you almost have a world now where like every kid is virtually exposed to New York City like early. Um, the information that's coming at them, what they have access to, what they can do online is like very it's like the Wild West. In terms of like what they are able to do physically, like it's very dependent on where they live, and it's that really has changed. I think like Jonathan Haidt is a researcher. Shoot, I think he's from NYU, but I could be wrong about that. But he wrote a book called Anxious Nation, and one of his main pillars is like we protect kids in the world too much, and we don't protect them online enough. I think there's some truth to that. I don't think it's as easy as like he prescribes to protect kids online. Like I think it's actually really complex, just given what the technology is. But I think there's some truth to that. Like we've been very hesitant to like let kids go out and play in the street alone, but then we will like let them just have access to Reddit and just be like, go figure it out. So yeah, so there's a lot of stuff that's similar, but then you add on layers of complexity that I think just kind of poke at all of the challenges of adolescence and make it hard to be a teen. And I think we've seen in the data that it just makes it more challenging to get through adolescence.
I love the analogy of it's like growing up in New York, but even like multiplied by 10. Are there any products you found or just like guidelines and frameworks that you've seen parents successfully use to help protect their kids a bit from the internet?
Man, that's a good question. I'm probably not the expert, to be honest. Like, I think I spend my days thinking about how to make the teens feel better. Um, it's hard. It's hard, and like I guess what I can say is I feel so deeply for parents of teens today because they've got a very hard task, which is to give your kids the level of independence that you want a normal adolescent to have, and that they have in conjunction with their peers, while also protecting them from things they shouldn't have access to. And I hear this a lot from parents, which is like, I don't want my kid to be on social media, but all their friends are on social media. So like, if I don't let them on it, they're left out. Man, that's a hard problem, because if you don't let them be where their friends are and they don't have friends, like they're probably going to have mental health issues. But if you let them on social media and they spend too much time on social media, they're probably gonna have mental health issues. So it's hard, and I don't think anything is right or easy. My advice as a non-parent, which is always hilarious to give because I'm not a parent, but in my observation, kids will become who the parents are, not what the parents say or do. So, like, my advice to any parent is, like, if you want your teen to be, um, able to navigate hard situations, able to, be resilient, able to communicate, like, you have to be that too, and if there are areas where you struggle to do those things, it's very likely that your teen is gonna do the same. I think that very much resonates with my personal experience. So but again, I'm not a parent, so I don't deem to be able to give parenting advice.
Right there with you. But it makes total sense in modeling what a reasonable social media consumption could look like of just like a couple minutes a day versus doom scrolling is going to play a big impact on what your kids see and follow. Um, Patrick, let's say that you could wave a magic wand, a magical empanada wand, and really redesign how Medicaid funds teen mental health. What would you change about our current system?
Well, I actually think Medicaid is where innovation is happening right now in behavioral health, so I'll give it sort of the gold star there. I mean, look, it's hard to get it's a weird answer, but, like, I'm not actually sure that anything should change. Like, I think there's reasons why everything is hard, Our product, because of the way that actually, sorry, this is what I would say. I would have a payment mechanism for text messaging, um, because that would, I think, unlock a lot of new, paradigms for how you can engage patients, and I think just, like, enable a whole new wave of, um, services that I think are more flexible, more, engaging, and more built into people's lives. We have to do a lot of legwork when we go to negotiate our contracts to be able to allow us to provide text messaging. You know, some of our competitors who don't do that or have a much easier contracting process because they're doing something that is a little bit more standard for a health plan. So that's what I would change. Is like just allow for platform messaging for even if it's for specific use cases, right? Like the reason we do platform messaging is not because I want to or like I think it's a good idea. It's because I could not get kids to show up to video calls consistently to a level that was impressive or a good product experience for anyone. So like it's out of necessity to engage these kids. And so I guess my position would be like if we as a society or we as a health industry want kids to engage with mental health, uh, we got to be able to do it over text. So we should allow for payment and billing for platform messaging.
Meet them where they are. Makes total sense. Um, I love to shift the conversation a bit to translating mental health insights into the workplace, and especially for overseeing and managing younger employees. Um, what can corporate leaders, from just your experience building this product, what can corporate leaders learn from peer mentorship models, especially when it comes to supporting those younger, fresh out of college employees?
I think vulnerability as a leader can go a long way in just making your teen team feel open. I don't even think I'm great at this all the time, but like I think especially for junior employees, like work is kind of really stressful because you don't actually know what to expect. You've kind of never been through it before. You've never been through a layoff. Like there's just a lot of like stress, and I'm again I've never had a real job, so like this is a bit hypothetical, but I assume when you join a new company, you're sort of looking up top at the people above you for how to act and what to do. And I think that there is a probably a tendency, just like there is for parenting, to like act like everything is fine all the time and like this is not hard. But like I think every job is hard in its own ways. And um, there are healthy ways to share how you're feeling that don't take up unnecessary space in the workplace and aren't like blow ups that are like problematic. And I think as a leader, like if you want your team to feel like work is a place where they can be themselves, you kind of have to be yourself too. Again, like I don't think I'm perfect at this all the time. Um, But at least in theory, you know, I want my team to be able to come to me if they're having a terrible day and be like, "I need some help," and be like, "Yeah, great." How would I ever expect them to do that if I never do that? And, like, I probably have never done that, you know? So, maybe this is feedback and coaching for myself live on this podcast.
Thank you for the self introspection. It's something I think about a lot on my end too. Ever since my experience going through mental health challenges, it's I've been very intentional about making the core value, one of the core values of each company I start, being prioritize mental health and doing things like mental health days and therapy resources. But so much of it also just comes down to how I and my leadership team are setting the example for the rest of the team to follow. Um, are there any other tips or practices you've found that I'd love to learn too from you that just can really help to engage, especially that younger generation?
I'm gonna answer this question in maybe a different way than you're hoping, just 'cause I don't feel like I have anything novel to contribute to, like, how to engage young employees. Like, there are some tools, though, that I think that I have found useful in a both personal and professional context, um, in order to just, like, help understand, I think, how our emotional selves show up at work. Because I think, like, it's easy to think that your logical brain turns on when you're at work and your emotional brain turns on when you're at home, and then they're kinda off and on, but, like, I actually don't think that's true, and I think that, at least in my experience, the emotional side of me showed up at work very anxious for and still does, and when I just sort of, like, act like it's not there, it comes out in ways that are not helpful. So, there's a book called Positive Intelligence. I can't remember the author's name, but, it's essentially this theory about how in each of us, we have a list of saboteurs, which is the way that when stress or anxiety comes into our life, it's the way that our emotional body reacts. As an example, one of mine is hypervigilance, where, like, if I am stressed about a meeting coming in 2 weeks, my brain will loop constantly on every possible thing that could happen in that meeting, so that way I feel like I know exactly what to say. That can be helpful for, like, 10 minutes, but eventually there's nothing new to, like, actually go through, and so you're just, like, your brain is just running. And so this book essentially walks through the different buckets. I think, man, I need to reread the book because I clearly can't remember. I think there's, like, 7, saboteur buckets, and, but it really left an impact on me because I think it put language to a lot of the internal experience that I had with these feelings that I didn't have, and it gave me an ability to say, "Oh, here's that." So, I guess my first piece of advice would be, like, try to gain a deeper understanding of how your emotional self shows up at work, because ultimately what you wanna be able to do is use your emotional body as just information, right? And then use that for decision making at work. Like, "Oh, that thing stresses me out. Why does that stress me out?" Well, it's probably because I actually feel like we're not on pace to hit that thing. And so, like, if we don't do anything right now, we're gonna miss that. That's gonna be bad for me. So, like, it's just information to take action on. Um, I think the other thing recently, that I'll share that is I found really helpful is this practice called journal speak, which is, a chronic pain clinician named Nicole Sachs is the one who, has essentially pioneered the popularization of this technique. It's really simple. It's just like you sort of write a list of the things that have happened to you in childhood that, have really impacted you. You list the things about your personality that make your life challenging, and then you list sort of the things that you're struggling with currently. And you just very intentionally every morning for 20 minutes journal about those topics. You journal about them with, like, raw honesty to the point where, like, you kinda rip up the pages afterwards so that you don't ever read them again, no one ever reads them again. And the idea is, like, we don't actually ever allow ourselves to feel the deep, sorta, like, scary feelings, like rage or, resentment or hate or elation. Like, we sort of, like, naturally confine our emotional range because, like, I don't know, I don't wanna show up at work and be like, "I hate you." You know, that's like that's a weird that wouldn't happen, but we do have those feelings. And so, for me, the process of getting those out on paper has actually been really helpful because then they're not sitting inside and they're not just like kind of taking up space. Um, so, two practices that I think could be helpful for anyone, but especially young people who I think are trying to navigate just their emotional world at work, um, might want to check out.
Yeah. That first practice you mentioned, it reminds me a lot of IFS work. If you've read the book No Bad Parts, basically like what is the purpose that this part of me that wants to iterate over and over about this upcoming meeting, how's it protecting me? And like how can I speak to it to maybe help calm it down, but still honor what purpose it's serving?
Positive intelligence is essentially the business package of IFS. So which it makes it resonate with people who are business minded.
Yep, I love that. And Patrick, I'd love to hear just from your story. You know, how do you personally manage just the huge emotional toll of working in youth behavioral health and all the challenges that come with that day to day?
I just shove it down and act like it's not there. Um, uh, I say that half joking. I don't know, like I think for better or for worse, one of my traits has always been that I'm just like stubborn, and so I there's never like a thought in my mind of like, oh, I should stop doing this. Like it's just kind of the thing that I'm doing, and I think I try to best just take care of myself. I try to make sure that I'm eating enough. Obviously, having history of an eating disorder, like that's something that is easy for me to slip back into. So I really try to make sure that I take care of myself there, my physical body. I have a therapist that I meet with every week, um, and like I do not compromise on meeting with her just because I know that um, I need that time to know that every week I have that time. If I don't have that time, then it's like I don't have I don't have the mental knowledge of I'm gonna have a time to talk about this, and it sort of just like helps kind of stabilize me across the week. Even if on a week, like there's some weeks where I don't have anything, or I'm talking about work, I'm just like complaining about stupid stuff to her that like she doesn't care or need to know about or is not that helpful. But I think that practice is really helpful.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And lastly, Patrick, what's one strongly held belief that you have that you think 90% of other founders would disagree with?
I'm so bad at asking these questions. Like I would fail every like Peter Thiel founder fund interview. Maybe it's because I'm just not actually that much of a critical thinker. I think I think in going along with this, I have I think I have a belief that um a lot of founders grip really tightly to the wheel, um and almost like religiously say things like this will work, it's going to work, I know it's going to work. Almost like out of a desire that if they enchant themselves enough that it will work. And I don't know, I've never resonated with this. Like I've sort of always from day one been like this might not work, but we're still going to try it anyway. Um and so maybe my belief that I think maybe 90% of other founders don't have is like you don't need to grip the wheel so hard that you need it to happen in order for it to happen. Like so much is out of our control. I mean, I think about this in our world, like so much of our business is like getting lucky enough to where at the right time in the right place, our value prop resonates with the right person at a health plan who like has a problem that we can solve. Like so much of that is out of my control. Obviously, we have to have the product. I have to show up at the right time. I have to give a good pitch. Like that's all in my control. But so much of that is out of our control. And um, I think like it's easy to look at the like rocket ship success stories and just be like, that's gotta be me. It's gonna be me. But like, um, in a way, like startups are also kind of like media where like some things just like hit it right on the nose. Like some artists just hit it right on the nose and then they rocket ship and they're huge. And like, but most aren't like that. Um, and I've honestly seen a lot of my friends struggle with their mental health and I think just like make their lives harder than it needs to be just because they're like this needs to work. It has to work. Like I have to convince myself this is going to work. And I actually wonder, this is me just totally talking, but I wonder if that's actually because they don't believe it's going to work and they don't believe in themselves. So they have to like repeat that to try to convince themselves. But like, I mean, I, all of my friends who are founders like are amazing, smart people who I have confidence that they will do amazing, smart things in the world. And I wish that like they would have confidence in that too.
I'm guilty of this too, of tying up so much self-worth within my own company, and the ebbs and flows of that directly impact my mental health too. So very well said. Awesome. Well, Patrick, where can people find you online and learn more about some things online?
LinkedIn is probably the best place. You can find me at LinkedIn. Trying to be better about social media. So that's kind of it right now. But maybe one day you'll be able to find me on Twitter.
Awesome. Well, Patrick, thank you so much for sharing your story. And I've said this a million times already on this episode, but I really, really respect you for the product you're building. And thank you we need more Patricks in the world.
Thanks, Joshua. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Cheers.